All right, 1 second. All right, we'll go on. Holding by the Book of Leviticus Chapter 18. Again, we're going. Holding by Book of Leviticus Chapter 18. We are in verse 4. And this part 40, it'll be part 41, 42, 43. I'm sure there's quite a bit to go through here. Again, we're holding by the Book of Leviticus Chapter 18, verse 4. The Torah says, Es mishpatai tasu vesukosai tishmaru valechet pem ani Hashem Elokecha. So here, again, the Torah says in verse 4, you shall do my judgments, keep my ordinances, things that don't make sense, right? To keep my judgments, things that do make sense. To walk therein, to go in their path. I am the eternal, your God. So we've been speaking the last number of weeks in the Kliyakar, and the Kliyakar had said, we were talking about the idea of that the Torah says in the next verse. The Torah says, we'll get there, I don't know when, but we'll get there. At the end of the verse, it says, V'chai b'hem, Ani Hashem. It says to live by the Torah, obviously not to die by the Torah, right? It says to live by the Torah, and that's talking about the next world, right? It's talking about the spiritual world. So we spoke about getting mitzvahs, getting the merit, the reward for mitzvahs in this world, and next one, how all that works. So here the Kliyakar continues, and he says, therefore we find mentioned, the Torah says in Tehillim, right? It says King David himself in Book of Psalms, chapter 119, verse 33. He says that let's get a good translation over here. 1 second. Let's see. It says over there. It says, instruct me, O Lord, in the way of your statutes, and as I shall keep it at every step. Right? That's what it says. That's what it says in Tehillim. Comes along the Kli Yakar, and he says, okay, what does that mean? What does that mean? So he says, further in verse 112, should look at that first, right? In verse 112, he says, I've inclined my heart to perform your statutes forever on their path. Yeah, so what does that mean over here? So he brings down over here the Kliyakar, and he says, brings down a medrash. Brings down a medrash of Parshas Eikev and Deuteronomy, and he says the first verse that we quoted in verse 33. Yeah, he says, what's that referred to? That is the mitzvah, the mitzvahs, the rewards for doing what we call mitzvahs kalos. Now, what are mitzvahs kalos? They're easy mitzvahs. Mitzvahs not so complex. Yeah, things I can easily do. So the Kliyakar says, very good. Where do I know this from? Where do I know from King David and the Book of Psalms? That's what it's referring to. So he says, the mitzvahs that are easy to do, what does a person do? They trample on them with their heels. Yeah, they step on. They don't take him so seriously. That's what Rashi said at the beginning. Parshas Eikev. Yeah, and the Satan comes along, Mr. S, the Satan, evil inclination, angel of death, whatever you want to call him, and the nations of the world. What do? They make fun. They scoff. They scoff at them. And they say, "What is this mitzvah? Yeah, why are you doing these mitzvahs anyway?" Now you tell me, okay. Normally, what would they scoff at? And we said before, chukim, laws that don't make sense. Yeah, so why are they scoffing over here at seemingly easy things? That's his question. He says you find this more by laws that don't make sense, by chukim, because the reason for these laws are not revealed. And they go against our seichel, go against our own understanding, right? In other words, there are plenty of laws, probably, most of the Torah doesn't make logical sense, but there are laws that are like totally logical. One of them being red heifer, right? So you have this cow, totally red, never been worked. Someone became impure, they take the cow, they burn the ashes, and they use those, the Kohen pours the ashes on the person, he becomes pure, and the Kohen becomes impure, right? That's irrational. How can someone become pure? Person making him pure becomes impure, right? Totally rational. So that would make more sense, says the Kuyakar, that the nations of the world and others would say, like, what's going on? Why would you keep these things? Anyway, he said that's more common. Because those reasons, we don't have a clue. Maybe we can try and figure it out. To the best of our ability, we still have to keep it, regardless of whether we understand it fully or not. Okay. Yeah, but these things are not revealed. Says the Kli Yakar, they're not revealed. Go against our own understanding. Right, in general. Right, in general. He says, therefore, says King David, what are these things? What's the goodness of these things that you're going to fear? Yeah. And you're going to do the things that don't make sense. Right? That go against our normal understanding. And those are things, he says, are mitzvahs kalos. They're very interesting. So he's saying over here, and we'll speak about mitzvahs kalos in a second, but he says the things that the nations, secular Jews will put in this category, but it's really for the nations. That what? What are they going to claim? They're going to claim, like, why are you keeping these laws? Why are you keeping these antiquated laws? They don't make any sense. Right? Not just that they're old, and they're backwards and whatever. They don't make sense. So they're going to make fun and they're going to scoff. They're going to scoff at all these laws. They're going to say, come on. We saw before, as Rashi says, about eating pig. Right? You're going to say, come on. God really cares if you eat pig? Right? Does it really matter? Right? It's only one, there's one prohibition. Right? Why should God care? Or why should God care about the red heifer? Why should God care about these other things that are rational? Yeah, and they make fun. They scoff. We say, like, oh, it's blind faith, right? I don't want to hear people saying that, yeah, it's blind faith. You only believe, right? So we always say that's for the Christians, right? We believe with knowledge. Very good. Yeah. But these are things, that don't make sense. That are not logical. And then he compares it, and he says, these are mitzvahs kalos. These are, quote unquote, the easier mitzvahs. Now, based on that, Rashi said before, Rashi said at the beginning of Parshas Eikev, right? And others echo the same thing. What does the word Eikev mean? It means the heel, right? Yaakov, right? Yaakov, hanging on the heel of Esav, trying to get out first, right? So he can inherit, so he can be the firstborn, right? Let's say, right? So he's called Yaakov for that reason. And the root of the word Yaakov is Eikev, right? It means heel. Yeah, when it says over there, the book of Deuteronomy. Yeah, let's just see. Let's just see over here. What does the Torah say? Torah says it comes to pass before you hearken to these judgments. Or actually, let's say better. 1 second. Uh, yeah, it says if you heed these ordinances, safeguard them by studying how to before them. Right before them, God, your God, will keep the covenant with you or for you, as well as the kindness that He swore to your fathers. Right. So it says vaya Akev. Right. It says if you will heed them. Yeah. So what does Rashi there say? So Rashi there says, I find it here. Yeah, Rashi says, what does it mean vaya Akev? Tishma'un, that you will heed these commandments, you will listen to these commandments. It means you heed the light commandments, mitzvahs, kalas, that a person tramples on with his heel, right? Playing the word akev, right? Akev means heel. So he's going to trample on these easier mitzvahs. Now, what's he talking about? What's he talking about here? So Rashi and others going to say the same thing, right? Going to say the exact same thing. And that is, there are things that a person can do. It's not hard. Now, again, whether it makes sense or not, 100% or not, okay, we can argue. Yeah, but they're not difficult mitzvahs to do, right? They don't cost a lot of money. I don't have to go out of my way to do it. Yeah, well, give an example. Give an example. You take, a Jew gets up in the morning, the first thing you do is say Moda'ani, and you wash your hands, right? So you got a cup of water, say by your bed, certainly better to wash by your bed. Otherwise, there's a lenient opinion. I can walk in my whole house or apartment and wash wherever. I can wash in the kitchen, wash in the living room. You should wash in the bathroom, right? Whatever. But that's an easy mitzvah to do. Yeah, all you need is a cup. All right, you have a cup, you have a basin, right? Let's say, yeah, you wake up in the morning, you wash your hands. Very good. That's not hard to do. Yeah, building a sukkah. Really? Not so hard to do. Can use any material. Right? It has to have, 3 walls and, or, 2 walls and part of a wall or 3 walls, whatever it is. I can make it from any material. That doesn't cost any money, right? It's not going to cost you very much. Yeah, the other parts of them, it's mites, right? By love and esrog, okay. Those things may cost more. That's a relatively easy mitzvah to do, right? Not so complex. So there are easier mitzvahs to do. There are harder mitzvahs to do. Yeah. Now, he's telling you, Raj is telling you, even something easy. What do we do? Rashi says, if you keep even the light commandments that a person tramples on with their heel, what's going to happen? Rashi says further, God will help keep his promise to you. He'll guard you. Will keep his promise to you. Very good. Now, why? Why something like this? What about if you keep much harder mitzvahs? He's telling you. So he's telling you like this. Rashi's telling you that if you keep the easier mitzvahs to do, he says a person tramples on them. Now, what does trampling on them mean? Simple explanation. They'll do it. for whatever reason, right? Either you don't do it at all, or you scoff at it. You say, okay, it's so easy. You forget about it. It's not that important to you. You'll say washing your hands doesn't compare to not eating pig or not desecrating Shabbat, right? It's a very easy comparison. Extremely easy comparison. Yeah. In other words, no one's going to say, they shouldn't say, that those two mitzvahs are comparable in any way, shape, or form. One's death penalty, right? Law of the Shabbos, if there be a Sanhedrin, if there be a Jewish Supreme Court, yeah, you got warned for exactly the right category and all that, death penalty. That's a lot more severe than if you don't wash your hands in the morning. Call it spiritual cooties, as Kaufman would say. Okay, you don't know where your hands have been, during the night. Couldn't touch the place that is, that's covered. So therefore you have to wash your hands either for that reason, or that the soul comes back into the body. So you have to wash your hands for that reason. You're considered a new creation. Whatever it may be, that's easy, and it's not a problem to do. Yeah, it's certainly not a problem to do. Yeah, can people be lazy in it? Absolutely. People can be, people can be lazy. People can be lazy in the things that are easy to do. Now, things that are harder to do, let's say, or the punishment is much greater, you're going to be more careful. Thank God, same in vain, right? Now someone there mentions washing in the morning is just logical hygiene. Who says? Who says washing your hands is hygiene? Right? Unless your body's dirty, which it shouldn't be. Yeah, your hands don't need to be clean, technically. You say, well, it's better for hygiene. I don't know. I don't know if it's better for hygiene. Right? I don't know if it's better for hygiene. At all. It has nothing to do with hygiene. Yeah. It has nothing to do with hygiene. It has to do with getting rid of this spiritual impurity. Nothing about being clean, right? You can test this in the morning. A person goes to sleep, they wake up in the morning, or they take a nap during the day. Probably going to get up, go to the bathroom, very good. Check your hands. See if your hands are dirty or not. Probably not, unless they were dirty beforehand. Right? Very rare it's going to be dirty. There's nothing to do with hygiene. The spiritual thing, right? The total spiritual thing over here. Right? Nothing to do with hygiene. Now, that being said, right? That being said, that's an easy thing to do. Now, it could be a little more complicated. A person's married, you don't want to make so much noise, wake up your spouse, this and that. But okay, but it's an easy thing to do. A relatively easy thing to do. Right? So, says the Torah, beginning Parshas Eikev, right? Says the Torah over there. Deuteronomy chapter 7, verse 12, you can look it up. It says, if we heed these ordinances, and safeguard them, we're talking about things that make sense, not that don't make sense. And you perform them, God will keep the covenants. Right? As well as the kindness he's for your forefathers. Very good. But he says, Rashi says, you have the right commandments, and the person's going to trample on them. Now, trampling on them means you don't do them. See, the ones that have greater punishments or potentially greater reward, that will be more careful. That 100%. That 100%. Yeah, person's going to keep it. Why? Or a person may trample on it. They're lazy. 100% they're lazy. It's so easy to do. Forget about it. It's not, they don't look at it as being so important. Okay. Now, they don't look at it as being so important. What can they do? They can trample on it. Right? They can trample on it. Yeah. Yeah, they can trample on it. So what happens when you trample on it? You don't take it seriously. You're not going to work so hard to do it. Why? Because it's easy to do. But we can come up with all kinds of excuses why we may not do it. Yeah, we don't have time, or we're busy, or whatever. Come up with any number of excuses. Right? You come up with any number of excuses. Yeah, someone points out, you make a blessing on it, very good. Yeah, doesn't even matter. What are we talking about that? The thing itself, The thing itself, you take this negovasa, you take this cup, right? And you wash your hands 3 times, right? Left to right, right to left, vice versa. 3 times, right? You have to wash your hands. That's hard. Not so hard. Now, some people will be more stringent on it, some people are less stringent on it. What's the point Rashi's making? The point that Rashi's making is there are things that even if they make sense, yeah, we just don't take them seriously because they're easy to do. We overlook them. Yeah, person will be more meticulous with what? Person will be more meticulous with the laws of contrast, with the laws of Shabbos, let's say, with other laws. Now the punishment is much greater. Yeah, so he says, the Kliyakar over here says that he run out from the Medrash. You run out from the Medrash over here. What's talking about mitzvahs? Talking about easy mitzvahs to do. So how do I know from this verse in Tehillim? This verse in the Book of Psalms comes along the Kliyakar and asks, how do I know from the Medrash? Where do I know from the Medrash that that's what it's talking about? So he says. So he asks the question. He asks the question like this, as we said before, right? Let's flesh out the question. He says, what's the Torah you're talking about? Right? Or what's the Torah over there talking about? Parshas Ekev. Mishpatim. What's a mishpat? A law I do understand. Right? Talking about a law I do understand. Now, we're talking about a law I do understand. Says the Kliyakar, doesn't make sense. Why are you talking about over here? Right? Why are you talking about, that if it's something easy to do, very good. And he says, from the Medrash, the nation's going to make fun of it. Okay, but we're talking about mishpatim. We're not talking about chukim. Right? Chukim are laws we don't understand. Right? For instance, the red heifer, law we don't understand. Or eating milk and meat together, law we don't understand. Very good. That makes sense. Right? That would make sense. But here he's talking about laws we do understand. Okay. So now he's talking about laws we do understand. Right? He says that these are things that would go against our own understanding. Yeah, and they are considered easy mitzvahs. Even laws we don't understand. What's the point here? Well, what's he driving at? So Kliyakar here says, we're talking about before rewards for mitzvahs either in this world or in the next, right? Or both, seemingly. And he goes on to this other thing. He says, when you talk about mitzvahs, when you talk about mitzvahs in general, mitzvahs can be easier to do. Mitzvahs can be harder to do. So a mitzvah that's easy to do, what do we call it? Mitzvahs kalas. What's the problem? What if it's something that's hard to do? So we always say, the Gemara says, Lefitzar agra. According to the amount of reward, according to the amount of effort that a person does in this thing, whatever it is, that's the amount of reward. Very good. In other words, no pain, no gain. The harder it is for someone to do something within Torah and mitzvahs, then by logic we should say, the harder it is, the person succeeds in doing it at whatever level, very good, but it's very hard for them. So what happens? They get tremendous reward. They get unbelievable reward. Why? Because of the amount of difficulty that's put in front of them. Or they put themselves, let's say, for argument's sake, some people maybe certain things are easier, other people, certain things are harder. Okay. But even if it's very hard for a person, they're extremely hard for a person, whatever it may be, they're going to get unbelievable reward for being able to do it at whatever level. We say, Lefitzar agra, very good. Right? In other words, the amount of efforts that you put in is the amount of reward you get. Okay. So the harder the effort, right? The harder the thing is, the greater reward a person will get. Good. What about something that's easy to do? Right? Something that's easy to do in general, people don't necessarily want to do it. Why? Because it's easy. Yeah, I only take the hard things. Right? What's the problem with saying that? right? You got 613 commandments. You can probably do less than half of them, right? Less than half are probably going to apply today, right? In general, for most people. So you can only do less than half. You say, I'll pick the ones with the greater reward. But see, that's not what the Torah says. The Torah says I have to keep everything. Whatever applies, I have to keep. Yeah, at whatever level. I have to keep it. So, if it's easier to do, what's the person going to do? They'll slough it off. They're going to do it at the highest level. They may not even do it at all. Or maybe they may do it a little bit, right? But what do they do, though? What essentially do? They trample on it. That's what Rashi says. That's what Rashi says, begin chapter 7, Book of Deuteronomy. Rashi makes very clear. That's what people will do. They will trample on the quote-unquote lighter mitzvahs. Right? Well, you see, there's an inherent problem. There's an inherent problem. What's the problem? The problem is we have no idea, for the most part, what rewards, and, again, we want to keep mitzvahs whether we're going to get reward or not. We should be keeping mitzvahs for that reason, right? But if a person's going to do it, don't we understand that every mitzvah, the reward, we can't even imagine what it does. Right? He's going to say further, or the Chaim Kadr is going to bring that down. We'll see. I don't know if we'll get to it today. But he says that every mitzvah corresponds to somewhere in the body. In other words, if you're doing a mitzvah with your whole body can resonate holiness. Because you're using your entire body for the sake of the mitzvah. Right? Or let's say you use a certain part of your body. Use your arm to do something, right? You help someone with the package. So you can tell me using your whole body, but let's say you're using your arm. You take a bag for someone. Very good. So that arm at that point is resonating holiness, getting tremendous amount of holiness. Why? Because it's helping someone else that's doing the mitzvah. Very good. Yeah. Now, you can tell me the arm, is connected, is connected to the shoulder connected to the head, to the neck to the head, it's connected to the whole body. The whole body's doing the mitzvah, maybe, right? But each, there are limbs that do certain mitzvahs. Very good. So that limb will resonate purity. Will resonate, we'll get an immense amount we can't imagine, of holiness. But a person can say, wait a minute, if I use it for holiness, very good. If I use it for bad? What if a person, I don't know, picks on someone and smacks him? For no reason. Or a person, let's say, they lift their arm, again, they lift their hand against someone. They don't hit them, but they lift their hand against them. Even if they don't hit them, what does the Torah say? You consider it a rush. You consider it evil. Now, it doesn't mean you can't repent. Yeah, so I could use my hand, my arm, my leg, my body in general for something good. And that will resonate the whole body into a kli, into a vessel of holiness. Very good. Make it much stronger spiritually. At the same time, I could use other parts of my body for bad. Right? So you say, well, it offsets. Well, let's say offset. Person going to remember. When a person, we spoke about this before. Yeah, when a person does a mitzvah, yeah, we can't imagine the reward in that mitzvah and what it does. For us, for the world, when a person transgresses, you're taking that light away from the world. You're drawing back from God. You're causing potentially bad things to happen to yourself, in the world in general. That's how powerful the spiritual influence can be. And you're taking like 3 steps backwards. So you say, okay, but let's say the mitzvah I just did, I did it, with a lot of strength, and it was very hard, right? Let's say, so the mitzvah you did, the reward is immeasurable. Why is the reward immeasurable? The rewards are measurable because, again, Lafit Saragra, you put in a lot of effort. Yeah, the reward should be unbelievable. So a person will say wrongly, they'll say, okay, this you did with a lot, it's very hard for you to do. You end up doing it very good. And then okay, then you transgress over here. So you say the reward for this mitzvah that you did is so great, it's going to offset. It's going to offset what you just did. Now, again, let's say the transgression wasn't something, so major, but still a transgression, right? But we'll keep it in perspective. The Rabbeinu Yonah and Shari Tshuva. Rabbeinu Yonah says in Shari Tshuva, the gate of repentance. Yeah, the Rabbeinu Yonah says in the third gate. Now, in the third gate, it's talking about the different punishments for sins that a person may do. And he says over there that there's no positive command, i.e., to eat matzah, put on tefillin if you're a guy when you're supposed to put on tefillin, right? Any positive command, do this, do that, do the other thing. He says there's no positive command ever that is not dependent on resurrection of the dead. So the person say, they weren't under onus. They'll say they're too tired to get up. They don't want to get up and pray. They don't want to get up and do X mitzvah, whatever it is. Yeah, not because they're under onus. Not because it was beyond their control. What was the problem? They're lazy. They didn't do it. Okay, so I didn't do it. They didn't do it. The incarnation convinces you why it's not so bad and different things. Person will rationalize and say, I'm holding better than 95% of world Jewry, and God's gonna, God will cut me some slack, and whatever. So we'll justify it. Why you didn't do it. You say, okay. Comes on Rabbeinu Yonah and says, no. Rabbeinu Yonah says there's no positive command a person does, it's not dependent on resurrection of the dead. That's pretty severe. We're not talking about, a negative command, right? Don't desecrate Shabbos, don't eat treif, plenty of negative commands also, right? More negative commands than positive commands, but okay. Doesn't say that about a negative command. If you refrain from doing it, it's a by positive command to teach you what? That even something you don't think, okay, I do it every day or whatever, whatever it is. So I miss one day, right? Okay, I tried, whatever, didn't do it. Why didn't you do it? For the most part, you're lazy or whatever, you got busy, you forgot, this, that. What's the bottom line? What's important to you? What's not important to you? That's the bottom line. Yeah, it wasn't important to you. Says Rabbeinu Yonah, you got to think that everything I do, right, is going to depend on, resurrection of the dead. It's going to depend on something so important. But again, a person poo-poos it and, okay, he ended up doing it, very good, or not so good, whatever, right? But what's the person going to say wrongly? What's the person going to say? The mistake a person will make will say, listen, I just did this big mitzvah. I did a huge mitzvah with a lot of self-sacrifice, tremendous amount of self-sacrifice. So therefore, I'm going to get such a reward for that, God's going to overlook what I did before. So I'll give an example. Whenever I speak about this, I give this example. There was somebody who was very close to Cheskel Abramsky, a blessed memory, in London. He was the head of the base in London. And then he spent his last years in the land of Israel, one of the Torah giants of the last generation, certainly according to everybody, nothing to talk about. And one person he had a close connection to was during the war. This guy was in the Royal Air Force. And what did he do? What was his job? He went bombing the Germans, right? On a regular basis. Went bombing the Germans. And he risked his life every day. Right? Every day he risked his life. So Cheskel Abramsky sees him, calls him over, starts talking to him, and asks him how things are going. And, he says, Baruch Hashem, whatever, but he said, Cheskel Abramsky want to know how's he doing spiritually. Yeah, how's it going spiritually? So So the person said, well, you should know that I do a tremendous amount of self-sacrifice every day. Every day I go bomb, I go bomb the Germans. I risk my life. So even though I'm keeping kosher, I keep Shabbos on Shabbos because of my nerves, because of what I've gone through, and what I do. I smoke on Shabbos, right? So what the person say? So the person said, God's going to overlook that, right? I'm doing such a big mitzvah for the Jewish people, trying to destroy the Nazis, right? May they be blood up, may they rot wherever they are. Very good. Yeah. So he says, God will understand. God 100% will understand. Because I'm doing such a big mitzvah. Tremendous self-sacrifice. Comes on Cheskel Bromsky and says you're making a mistake. You're making a huge mistake. What's the big mistake? The big mistake is, you're right. You're going to get a lot of credit and a lot of merit for the self-sacrifice every day. Every day you go bomb them. Yeah, tremendous self-sacrifice. Very good. You're forgetting one thing. God's not going to overlook the fact you desecrate Shabbos. Desecrating Shabbos is severe punishment for that. Tremendous punishment for that. On the other hand, great. You'll get great reward for the self-sacrifice, but don't make the mistake and think that what you're doing now is great self-sacrifice is going to cover up the fact that you desecrate Shabbos. Yeah, you shouldn't make that mistake. So now a person's going to come and say, okay, I'm keeping these mitzvahs, and these mitzvahs are very hard to do, but these other mitzvahs that we could, let's say, trample on and walk on that are so-called easier mitzvahs, right? Let's say, you don't pay too much attention to. Then you sort of like, you push them off. You push them off. Now, why do you push them off? So Rashi says, because they're light in your eyes. What about Rabbeinu Yonah? What about what we said about Rabbeinu Yonah? And that there's no positive command a person does not depend on resurrection of the dead. Person's not thinking that. Whatever, he's lazy. We're all lazy. At a certain level. A person's lazy. I don't feel like doing it. Get up in the morning, they want to get their hands wet, so to speak. At the beginning, they're half asleep and spilling it and this and that. Okay. Yeah, so some people that might be a harder mitzvah. Okay. Whatever it is. Yeah, whatever it is. So a person's going to say, they're not going to have a good excuse why. They may make an excuse, but at the end of the day, you see through it, they're lazy. Right? They're just, I don't feel like doing it. I didn't feel like, getting out of bed so early. I didn't feel like, I ate bread and I didn't feel like benching. I didn't feel like saying grace after meals. You tell me, well, maybe grace after meals is a Torah obligation, at least the first 3 blessings, or the first 4 blessings. Maybe tell me it's a Torah obligation. Okay, that's harder thing to push off. Right? But we get caught up in this idea. It's like, well, it's probably rabbinical. Even though it's a mitzvah to listen to the rabbis, serious mitzvah to listen to the rabbis, right? Nonetheless, the person will say, well, it's not a Torah obligation. Maybe, it's a certain custom and this and that. So a person could push it off. A person could push it off and say, yeah, I didn't do it. But I don't have a good excuse for it. They can come up with something, but let's just say it's not such a good excuse. So what are they doing? They're doing exactly this. They're trampling on something. Nothing's hard for them. Not a question of being hard. That's a different issue. If it's something easy to do, it doesn't take that much time or effort, and they don't do it. You say, well, they're overcome by the evil inclination. Okay. You'll say it's not really a rebellion against God. Yeah, I mean, technically, every transgression is. But, you'll say, well, they're doing their best. They're keeping most things, this and that. Okay, that's very good. Yeah, a person's keeping most things. That's very good. Yeah, so a person, let's say, is weaker in this area, or is weaker in another area, or certain things they just don't do. Why don't they do it? They're lazy, right? Not going to give anyone going to throw everyone under the bus. They're lazy. They could do it, they don't. Yeah, bottom line, right? Bottom line. So what happens? So you take these things that are easy to do, and you trample them. You trample all over them. Now, a person will say, but God's going to look at the bigger picture and this, that. You're right. But what does that do? What, in essence, does that do? What that does is, if a person is going to trample on things that are easier to do, what about things that are much harder to do? Forget about the reward. Forget about what we said before. Right? According to the amounts of effort you put in, you get the reward. Forget about that. Yeah. What's that going to do? That'll make a person's ability to do that less. Why? Because it's the easy ones. Again, I'm not going to say all of them. Some easy ones they push aside. Some easy ones they don't do. Yeah, let's say. They don't do. So what does that do? That weakens a person's resolve. When that weakens a person's resolve, what's that going to do? It's going to make it much harder for them to do the harder things. It's going to be much harder. Why? Because the easy things they're not doing. Some of them. So that makes the person weaker spiritually. That's what it does. Right? The less, we're going to see this, I don't know, maybe next week, next couple weeks, right? But Mishnah Perkei Avos says that mitzvah goreres mitzvah, ve'er goreres aveir. Person does the mitzvah, what does he want to do? More mitzvahs, very good. When they transgress, they can do more transgressions. Nothing in between. Either I'm going one way, as we always say, or I'm going the other way. Either I'm doing positive things or negative things. There's no such thing as being mediocre and saying I'm happy where I am. No such thing. Either I'm going in the right direction or I'm going in the wrong direction. Right now, you can say, well, these things are going in the right direction. Good. And these things are going in the wrong direction. Okay, but you're either going up or down. Right? There's nothing in between. There's no, there's no being in the middle, there's no being neutral like Switzerland. Right? That's it. Right? No such thing. So either going up or going down. We do that all the time. Yeah, we have more successes, less successes, but we go up and down a lot. That's what happens because that's what life is. Right? That's what life is. Now, based on that, if I want to go in the right path and I want to do the right thing, what do we have to do? We have to make boundaries. Now, if you don't make boundaries, what's going to happen? What seemingly should happen? You'll fail. Because if I don't put up boundaries and people will say, I don't have to be so insular, I can take best of both worlds and blah, blah, blah. Yeah, in theory. Right? In theory, a person's going to say, I'm much more in control. Not true. What's the reason it's not true? Because the evil inclination works very hard. Works extremely hard. So when he's working that hard, a person can fail. Very good. Yeah, that's what he wants. And then a person, let's say, fails again. Yeah, or they fail a third time, and now they're miyash. Now they say, oh, there's no hope for me. Keep doing the same thing. Get this question a lot. Keep doing the same thing over and over again. Yeah, so figure out why you're doing it. Try and stop doing it, right? And then figure out what triggers it. And then once you know what triggers it, you have a plan. How are you going to do it? So people say, I don't have to be so insular, right? I can get the best of both worlds. Well, it doesn't really work so well. I became religious, let's say the religious Zionist, one Orthodox community. Yeah, and I have a lot of gratitude for certainly what they did for me, no question. At the same time, I see, what they become. Yeah, and how Torah giants of the next generation do not come from their community. Not saying they don't have their own rabbis or whatever. But comparatively speaking, it's not even close. I'll give an example. A number of years ago, many years ago, here in Israel, they had 22 new rabbinic court judges. 22. They I don't know, passed their exams, whatever, became rabbinic court judges here in Israel. 15 out of 22 came from the other Orthodox community. Now people say it's not fair. That's discrimination. Not a question of discrimination. Yeah, they're going to take the best people qualified, right? It's not just about passing tests. My rabbi says all the time, right? Not just the person knows the material. You have fear of heaven. I mean, it's not so easy to measure, but you have to have fear of heaven with that. That's why just passing the test is not enough. A person has to go, have connection to, great rabbis of generation in order that, their sanctity should rub off on them. Not just about passing exams. Okay. But 15 out of 22 came from the ultra-Orthodox community. Now, it's not a coincidence. Right? That's 58%. Anyone who wants to do the math. 58%. Right? That is significant. It's very significant. What's the difference? Because the ultra-Orthodox community, when a person gets married, right? When a person gets married, let's say age 23, 24, whatever it is, the guy gets married. Let's say in general, if they're not Hasidic, they'll get married younger. But if they get married, what's their goal? What is usually their end goal? Their end goal is to sit and learn as long as possible. Not easy to do it, I think, in Israel than other places, but that's their end goal. In other words, the most important thing to them, and that's how, for better or for worse, how we measure people is what they know. It's what their level of knowledge is. Now, different rabbis have more knowledge, people have less knowledge. Doesn't matter, right? But that's how it's measured. That's how it's measured. Now, if in that community, the most important thing, beyond the shadow of a doubt, is learning Torah, right? And Torah scholarship. Yeah, and that's the way, quote unquote, they've been brainwashed. Okay. That means after marriage, however it's going to work out, whether he's going to, guy's going to take side jobs, going to be helped by parents, in-laws, wife's going to work, all these things, right? For a number of years, he's going to try and sit and learn as long as possible. Now, the modern Orthodox religious Zionist world, what do you mean? You want to be a rabbi? Okay, so you're going to study, blah, 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 but you probably have other jobs, whatever. Yeah. You want to be a professional. You ask a modern Orthodox parent. There are four things, that your son could do. One is be a rabbi. One is be a lawyer. One is be an accountant. And one is being a actuary, right? Let's say. Lawyer, accountant, actuary, or rabbi. Yeah. So I guarantee, put my money where I don't have here. I'll put it down. I guarantee, or 90% or more, I think it's even higher than that. The rabbis, their son to be the rabbi, that's the last option. It'll never be a first option. Very rarely be a first option. Well, and again, a person does it, okay, right? But the odds of the parents wanting that for their child is very slim. Very, very slim. Again, I'm not going to say by everybody, I'm not going to throw everybody under the bus, but the vast majority, what do they want for their child more than anything else? Their son should be the doctor, lawyer, accountant, actuary, whatever. That's what they should be. A professional. And with a professional, what does that mean? Money. That's what they want. A person studied long enough, very good. You got to do something in the world. You got to write a book on tax law. Yeah? You got to do something significant for the world. You want to sit and learn? Come on. You said learn. You're in high school, right? You got to get real. You got to go to college. You might have a grueling schedule, 2 mornings, 2 afternoons a week. Yeah? And everything about the secular world that you have to, that you have to be a part of, right? You have to be a part of. You have to, be part of that world and all that. So their main thing is not about learning. Yeah? It's not about, doesn't mean they won't have fixed times to learn. I'm not going to say that. Many of them have fixed times to learn, whether in the morning, afternoon, at night, whatever it is. Okay. Yeah. But to sit, is an ideal. To sit and learn as long as possible, to make something into yourself, and for your family, right? For the sake of learning itself, that's not an ideal by them. It's for sure not an ideal by them. Now, how do I know? Because I was there. I don't think it's changed. I for sure don't think it's changed. I think it's gotten worse in different ways. Yeah. They have their brains re-squeegeed, as I would say. But anyway, it's not the topic. But the point is, if the main thing is religion, is Torah scholarship, and that's the most important thing, what's going to happen? What's going to happen in general? They'll produce the Torah giants in the next generation. Now, I'm not saying, in the modern Orthodox world, you don't have that. You don't have Torah giants. You have them. Compared to the ultra-Orthodox community, they're pale in comparison. Yeah, so I had somebody, once say, you're a traitor, you left us, this, that. So I told them very simple. I said, a mule is a very strong animal. A mule is a hybrid between a donkey and a horse. Anyone doesn't know. Yeah? There's one problem with a mule. What's the problem with a mule? Mule is sterile, right? Mule cannot reproduce. So I said, very clearly and very specifically, I said, in your community, you cannot reproduce. They're not reproducing Torah giants. They're just not. So this person obviously taken aback and offended, said, what? We don't have Torah giants? Yeah, we don't have Torah scholars? I didn't say you didn't have that. I didn't say they don't exist. I said you can't produce them. That's a big difference. It's a very, very big difference. Yeah, because again, what's the main emphasis? The main emphasis, you're telling me they keep Shabbos, they keep kosher, they keep other things. Okay. I'm going to disagree. Some more, some less. Okay. Some are very, very strong. Right? When I said you can, take with a grain of salt, throw it out the window. Very good. The vast majority, right? The vast majority, you're happy learning a little bit during the day and working. That's the vast majority. Now, I'll give you an example. How far this goes. My Rebbe had a connection to Rebbe Chanan Wasserman, probably one of the last people in the world that ever saw Rebbe Chanan when he was a kid. Yeah, Rebbe Chanan was the Hashem Yikam Damo, God should avenge his blood. His famous head of the Shiva Baranovich was the student, one of the main students of the Chofetz Chaim. And Rebbe Chanan used to stay by his parents' house when he came to England in order to raise money. So Rebbe was a kid. He was a child at that time. And one of the things Rebbe Chanan said that meant, even as a young kid, he was like, very smart, very perceptive. My Rebbe, being that said, what did Rebbe Chanan say? One of the things Rebbe Chanan said was that it's an obligation to learn Torah. We see there's an obligation to learn Torah, right? From when we say the Shema, right? We say V'shinantam livanecha. You have to teach your children, right? V'dibartabam, speak of it when you sit in the way, when you get up, when you lie down, right? All that. It's an obligation for a parent to teach a child. Parent can't teach the child. You got to pay someone, right? You got to pay someone for, if you can't do it, someone has to teach a person's children Torah. Okay. So Rabbi Chanan said, teaching your children, you do not, I don't know what the right word is, the obligation to teach them is that what's the end goal of teaching them? Lilmod lamed lishmor v'lasos. We say right before the Shema in the morning. Lilmod to learn Torah, lamed to teach if you have the ability, lishmor v'lasos to guard and to keep. Very good. So the whole idea of learning Torah is to keep it, not like it's an academic subject, not like it's Rabbi Rabbi Schneider, my Rebbe's Rebbe would say, Moshe Schneider would say, bless the memory, don't be an ultra-Orthodox student, don't be a frummer student, so to speak. Don't learn to like mathematics. But what did Rabbi Chanan say? He said further, you want to teach your kids? You got an obligation, let's say better. Parent has an obligation to teach their kids, or you have to hire someone to teach your kids. Very good. So you got an obligation to teach your kids. What's the ultimate goal you're going to teach them? What's the ultimate goal in the future? They should be rabbinic scholars. They should know everything. That's the ultimate goal. So he says, if my ultimate goal is, I want my kid to get a good education, secular education, and their whole ultimate goal is they should be a former Bala bus. They should be, an ultra-Orthodox, person who works. And that's the ultimate goal. He says you don't fulfill your obligation of teaching your kids. That's how far it goes. In other words, the ultimate goal of teaching your kids, certainly the boys to be rabbinic scholars, the girls to marry rabbinic scholars. Very good. That's the ultimate goal. And if that's not your ultimate goal, you don't fulfill the obligation of teaching them Torah or hiring someone to teach them Torah. You don't get the mitzvah, he says. That's how far it goes. right? Another person going to say, okay, you can learn Torah a little bit here and there. Very good. I want him to get serious. Let him go to college. You see what college is all about. Let him go to college. Very good. Right? It wouldn't be from a bobus. It wouldn't be a doctor, a lawyer, businessman. Let him go to real estate, this and that. That's the ultimate goal. No. Says Rabbi Chanan, no. Somebody says, no dice. That's not the mitzvah. The mitzvah is you want your kids to be the best they can be. That's what you're striving for? That your son should be in real estate? He should be in diamonds? Okay, if he's not going to learn, right? If he's not going to learn, good, so let him have a profession. Okay. But you got to give someone the opportunity to see what they're made of. You give them 5 years, right? At least, 5 years after they're married. Give them a certain amount of time, right? Why 5 years? Where do we get 5 years? That if you see they've learned, let's say for 5 years, and they're not having success in the learning, then you know they'll never have success, right? How do you know that? Because of discrepancy in the Torah itself. The Torah in one place says by the Levites, when do they start working? 25. Another place says 30. I got a contradiction. What is it, 25 or 30? I have a 5-year discrepancy. 5-year discrepancy. So Rashi and other commentators say, what's 5-year discrepancy? Exactly this. You give someone the opportunity to sit and learn, and you see if anything's going to come out of them. You're going to see if they're into it, if they're doing well, this, that, if they're learning like fire or not. Give them 5 years. If after 5 years, you don't have it, you don't have it. And some people say, I can't learn. They have, let's say, a person's got ADHD and someone's got something else, and it's very hard. Okay. Yeah, but what's the ultimate? The ultimate is trained to be the best. Right? Says Rabbi Chanan, you're not entertaining the possibility of training to be mediocre. Now again, this comes with other ramifications. Could be some negative ramifications. Meaning, if someone's sitting and learning, let's say they're learning full-time, right, after marriage. So they're held on a higher pedestal, let's say, than someone is working. Now, what are some of the ramifications? Now, the one who's working, he's going to help support the one that's learning, right? What we call Yisachar Zvulun relationship, right? They're going to give charity. They're going to help married men sit and learn. They're going to help strengthen, give money to yeshivas. Yeshivas always need help. Girls' schools, whatever, right? They're going to help support Jewish things, right? Orthodox things. Very good. Very good. When you say, Ein Kemach Ein Torah, right? The Mishnah Pirkei Avos says, you don't have flour. You don't have Torah. What does flour mean? Flour means money. So if you don't have money, you can't sit and learn. Now, there are people that sit and learn. They have nothing. People look at them and say, seems like they have very little, and they're poor, and this and that. Okay, that's, people make their choice. But what does the Rambam say? The Rambam at the end of Halachas of Shemitah V'Yovel, right? He says anyone can be like the high priest, right? A person sitting and learning, they have the status of what the Holy of Holies, the Kodesh Kedoshim. Yeah, so they're held to a different, on a different level. That's if they're doing it right. Not just doing it because, they don't want to work or they don't want to do the army or other things, right? Why are they doing it? To be the best that they can be. To be the best that they can be. So says the Rambam on that, they have the status of the Holy of Holies. That's pretty impressive. They have the status of Shevet Levi, right? Even in the time when the Jews were in Egypt. Yeah? Even Pharaoh understood Shevet Levi was not subjugated. They were in the land of Goshen, they were not subjugated. In other countries, people who, devote their lives to quote unquote to their religion. Yeah? They're not subjugated like other people. Let's say if you have to go to the army or other things. In every other country except Israel understands that. We're our own worst enemy. Right? So here, learning Torah, which I don't really want to get into, but learning Torah, it's not against the law. You can do it, but you have other responsibilities. Only Jews will say you don't have a right. Because you have other greater rights. Right? The other greater right is what is doing the army. Yeah, it's doing the army. That's even greater. Okay. But even without that, so you always need a standing army. Very good. Time of King David, you had a standing army. Okay. But you had people learning also. It wasn't just all or nothing. Wasn't everyone went to the army. Now, if you say, If you say, just on that topic for a second, because I don't want to harp on this, but if you say, okay, if it's a milchemes mitzvah, if you had the Urim V'Tumim, yeah, and you had a high priest, the high priest says, okay, so everyone has to go to war in this case, whatever it is, whoever the enemy is, because everyone has to go to war, right? Now the Urim V'Tumim can say yes or no, right? This is divine providence here. The Urim V'Tumim, this thing is going to light up. It's going to say, have two letters. Chaf Nun will be yes, Cain, or Lamed Aleph, lo. Right? Very simple. Right? You don't even have to, think about it. Either be yes or no. Now, if it's a real mitzvah, then everyone has to go. Even if a person is first married, even within the first year of marriage, got to go. Okay. Yeah, then everybody goes. Right? But for the most part, you had people sitting and learning. Yeah. So in other countries, they'll respect that. Yeah, they're not going to make them do other things that other people would normally do. Why? Because they're devoting themselves to God. That's worth something. That is something. Except in one place. Except in the holy place of the world in Israel. That's the only place they're not recognized. They're not recognized for what they do. It can only be Jews, right? It wouldn't even be non-Jews. But in any case, I want to digress. What does Rabbi Hanan say? I see there are a lot of questions. We'll deal with them, right? What does Rabbi Hanan say over here? Rabbi Hanan says, you want to be the best you can be. There's no mitzvah. Not only that, it's forbidden to strive for basic mediocrity. If a person's going to do it, they're not capable, very good. They have other issues. Okay. Yeah, so they have to work. Yeah, plenty of people have to work. You need people to work. Otherwise, Torah can't be supported. Very good. Yeah. But we're not striving for that. That's not the ideal, right? But on the other hand, yeah, so some of these people, they're helping yeshivas, this and that. They should be honored. 100% they should be honored. Yeah, within reason. Why? They're donating a lot of money to help yeshiva stay in existence, right? And having people sit and learn Torah, that's huge, right? That is huge. Yeah, but at the same time, you're going to say, well, what's more precious? Obviously, you're going to say learning Torah. But you need people to support Torah, right? That was the relationship between Yisachar and Zvulun, right? One tribe, sat and learned Torah. And the other tribe worked in order to support them. So you need both. 100%. Ein kemach, ein Torah. Right? You need both. But the ideal, if I don't make any mistake, right? What's the ideal? Says the Mishnah Pirkei Avos. And we always quote Pirkei Avos. Pirkei Avos says at the very beginning, goes the whole genealogy. Right? The whole genealogy. Moshe to Yeshua, Yeshua to Zkanim. Sorry, to Adri Knesset HaGedolah. Right? To the Men of the Great Assembly, etc. Goes the whole genealogy. And then it says the world stands on 3 things. What are the 3 things the world stands on? Torah, Avodah, and Gimel Chasodim. Avodah is either sacrifices or prayer. The world stands on that. Or on Chesed, or acts of loving kindness, or Torah. Now, Torah will say, just for sake of this argument, if nobody in the world, nobody in Australia, nobody in New York, whatever time zone, if nobody is learning Torah anywhere in the world, what happens to the world? The world goes back to Genesis chapter 1, verse 2. The world goes back to that original chaos, back in that Led Zeppelin album, anyone know what I'm talking about? Yeah, goes back to that original chaos. Now, that original chaos, the world doesn't exist. So you need somebody somewhere, always, somebody somewhere has to be learning Torah in the world. Otherwise, the world goes back. The world gets destroyed, essentially. So Torah is the ultimate, is the essence of who we are. Right? Without Torah, mitzvahs is like meat without the potatoes. Right? The people want to say, oh, the land of Israel is so precious and it's so holy. But if it has no connection to Torah and mitzvahs, then what's the difference? What's the difference between Tel Aviv and Miami? Nothing. Right? The only difference is, maybe here we have better falafel and people speak Hebrew. Okay. But what's the difference? What's the difference? You can't have a land without nothing. It's not just about a piece of land. It's about what's behind the land. About God's presence being here. Right? It's about being in the holiest place in the world. That's what it's all about. Right? Someone will say, oh, but look at Tel Aviv. Look at all the gays there. You got devil worship here. I was telling someone the other day. You got devil worship here also, right? So how does that work? How can you have devil worship? How can you have, all these gays and other terrible things going on in the land of Israel? Yeah, itself. So what's the simple answer? The simple answer is we have the greatest amount of holiness. You have the greatest amount of impurity. In other words, if a person comes to Jerusalem, someone told me this. Someone I knew growing up. So, they keep kosher to a certain extent, Shabbos, whatever, to a certain extent. But they know, coming from Tel Aviv, they know when they come to Jerusalem, Jerusalem's different. Yeah. Even somebody like that, and most people know. Most people know when they come to Jerusalem, it's a different feeling. It's a totally different feeling than anywhere else in the world. Right? Anywhere else in Israel. Listen, you can go to Bnei Brak, you go to, tremendously strong religious centers, different places, around the country, very good. You come to Jerusalem, Jerusalem's the holiest place. Right? It's definitely the holiest place, nothing to talk about. But even somebody like that, who's not, I wouldn't say they are so spiritually aware in many ways, even though they're spiritually aware, maybe in other ways, okay. But at the end of the day, they know there's a difference. They know there's a difference. So my Rebbe would say that, what's going on in Iran and other places, he says, I'm not worried about that. I'm not afraid what they could do, what they can't do in all these other countries. What am I more worried about? I'm more worried about Jews who sin in Israel. Whatever sin they do is bad. Yeah? But he said it's a scarier thought. The much scarier thought today, that you have Jews, Jews, whatever you say, you can say the part of the Erev, the mixed multitude, they're secular, this and that. But you can have Jews that say that Torah is not valid. Not because they don't believe it. Okay. You don't want to believe in it? Your choice. Everyone's got free choice. You want to believe in it? Good. You don't want to believe in it? Okay. But to say that someone wants to sit and learn, that's not valid. Right? They have to do something else. That is not valid. Getting, writing a book on tax law, that's valid. Learning all kinds of garbage at university, that's valid. Right? Why is it valid? Why is it valid? Because, quote unquote, it's doing something for the world. Okay. You need accountants. You need lawyers, right? Probably have too many of both here. Okay. No one says you don't need them. But that's not the ultimate. That's not the ultimate. The ultimate is Torah. But when you have Jews, even if they hate Torah, it's not surprising. Definitely not surprising. But at the same time, even if they hate Torah, even 100% they hate Torah, to say, it's one thing, you don't approve of it, you don't want your kids, keeping it, doing other things, okay. But to say it's not valid, like, you're going to mitigate somebody because they want to sit and learn Torah, that's their choice, right? Isn't democracy? I mean, more socialist than democracy, becoming more of a democracy, I would say, right? But, it's free choice. If Pharaoh himself understood, that who's this God, I should recognize him. But he understood, he didn't take and make slaves out of the tribe of Levi. The ones that sitting and learning Torah. Even Pharaoh understood that, as much as rebellious as he was. Other countries understand that. Other countries definitely understand that. How can it be? The only Jewish state in the world, they don't get it. Right? What's the simple answer? I'll take some questions now. What's the simple answer? The simple answer is, where you have the greatest amount of purity, you have to have impurity against it. That's what happens. Right? There's nothing in between. It's either, as we said before, it's either you're going up or you're going down. Nothing in between. So that being said, in the holiest place in the world, what are you going to have? In the holiest place of the world, you're going to have the greatest amount of Torah being learned. You're going to have the greatest amount of Torah being learned. There's nothing to talk about. At the same time, right? At the same time, what do you have? You can have other things that go against this. Right? Totally go against it. Right? Because again, the evil inclination, the Satan, Mr. S, whatever you want to call him, what does he do? He's going to complain and says, look, you had your presence there, telling God and this and that. Okay, you have to take your presence away, whatever. But you have to placate the Satan. So what does he do? He allows his people to be around, and create havoc for religious Jews. Right? And you're going to have them, this mixed multitude, you're going to have them wage a war. Like literally a war saying to learn Torah is not valid. Now, everywhere else in the world, as we said before, very simple. Everyone else, every other country in the world, they recognize it. They recognize, divinity schools and this and that. They're different. Even when we say, it's what do you call it? It's idolatry. It's other things, but they recognize people are sitting and worshiping God. Yeah, and they're going to do that on a regular basis, whatever. So they recognize that. Even though, you say it separates the church and state, they recognize it. Right? Here, they invalidate it. And they say, you're not doing anything. You're not upholding any values. You're not upholding anything. You're a bunch of cockroaches. You take all this money from the government. And, nobody works. Well, both statements are wrong. First of all, you got a lot of ultra-Orthodox Jews that do work. That's for sure. Right? But at the same time, it's like, taking so much of the budget. I mean, it's a joke. It's an absolute joke because the amount of money, which they just stopped, by the way, going to yeshivas and schools and all that, and, ultra-Orthodox schools, it's not even like 1%, right? If you're talking, a budget of like, I don't know, 500 billion or who knows what, what the ultra-Orthodox gets, as part of, for their yeshivas and girls' schools and, subsidized and this and that, money that they're giving is like a drop in the bucket. I mean, like really a drop in the bucket compared to what the money's going out. When I say drop in the bucket, I mean, how can you complain? And a lot of things are illogical, so I can't even ask the question. But, if you tell me they're getting 10% of the budget, 15% of the budget, 20% of the budget, I'll be generous. The numbers are big when you're talking those type of numbers. Even, let's say, 1/4%. Okay, it's a significant number, but in the bigger scheme of things, if the budget is $500 billion, let's say, and the yeshivas are getting $1 billion, but it's going all around, it's not just going to one place, let's say, that's a very small percentage compared to everyone else. Radio stations get, and secular schools get, and all these other garbage things that the government's going to give them. Most of it's spent on defense, okay, right? Not going to balk at defense here because they're protecting us, okay. But at the same time, how can you complain? Doesn't make any logical sense, and this is the point. Yeah, how can you complain? Even if it's $1 billion shekels, that's what they just stopped. $1 billion shekels going to yeshivas and schools and whatever. Yeah, they've owed for a long time. They've owed this money for a while, yeah? How can it possibly be you have the right to complain on such a thing, even though it's a lot of money? You'll say it's a lot of money, okay. But if it's not even 1/4%, do you have anything to say? 1/4%. Even if it be okay, 1%. It's 1% of the money. You're going to jump up and down and say, oh, they're bloodsuckers. They're cockroaches. They're not doing anything for society. 1%? Really? Okay, you'll tell me it's a significant number. Good. $1 billion shekels is a lot of money. Okay. Yeah, in the bigger scheme of things, what is it? 0. It's a drop in the bucket. Total drop in the bucket. You look at the, American spending, whatever, like $1 trillion deficit or more. Yeah. Yeah, trillions of dollars deficit. Yeah, but, they pass these budgets however they pass it. Right? Whatever it is. So imagine. Imagine out of that $1 trillion budget, $1 million goes to save the whales. Yeah, let's say. You're going to jump up and down. Save the whales? I mean, probably people happy save the whales. Okay. You're going to jump up and down and say, look at all that money they're giving. Come on, that's not even 1/4%. Not even a billionth of a percent. And you're going to jump up and down and scream and say they're sucking our bloods. They're not doing anything. They're parasites, right? Or they say in Hebrew, parasitim, right? They're parasites. They're cockroaches. They're this. They're that. 1/4%? Really? Really? That's how much the hatred is. That's the whole point. Now, and they're taking, and people sitting learning and they get a certain amount of money from the government. You know how much a college student gets? They get like 4 or 5 times the amount. Easy. Because they're learning in college. So that's worth something. They don't call them parasites. They call them cockroaches. They say, no, he's going to write a book on tax law. He's going to be world famous. Beautiful. I like to make fun of tax law, but okay. In either case, that's absurd. It's absurd. Yeah. You got to say, well, they're doing something for the world, and what's the bottom line? They do not respect people who sit and learn Torah. That's the bottom line. So therefore, you want to learn Torah, not at our expense. We shouldn't have to support it. So I would agree. Keep the big mouth shut. Don't take any money. Yeah? But if you're gonna take money, then Baal Mea, Baal Adei, they have what to say. Right? But it is causing a lot of hardship, that's for sure. So in the long run, okay. It's gonna be very hard. It'll be very hard. So, people have to fundraise more. And it is a lot harder. True. 100% true. Right? I think in the long run, it'd be better. So the government can't say anything. No one's taking money. No one's taking money. Right? But there are places seriously suffering because of it. Okay. But again, look at the percentages. The percentages are tiny. Tiny. And they're jumping up and down and screaming, right? Like we're taking like 50% or more. Right? And it's not even 1%. It's not even close. Not even close. All right, let me take some questions here. See, on topic or off topic. Somebody says, what happens? Conversion question. Okay. What happens? Some of the conversion process, no access to do based in tzedek, starts fully keeping child, put it on tefillin. Can't put it on tefillin. Nobody should be putting it on tefillin before conversion. No guy. Forget about women. Women forbidden to put on tefillin. No guy should be putting on tefillin. Period. Before conversion. Right? Even to learn how to put on tefillin, yeah, very good. So a person gets tefillin without the parchment in it to learn how to put them on right before conversion. Okay. So if you don't have a basin there, you're going to find a basin nearby. Right? In the States, you got plenty of basins. Right? Even a person, let's say, lives in the middle of the country. Let's say there's no basin there. So you have to go somewhere nearby. Yeah? Someone lives in Europe, let's say. Okay. Let's say there's no basin where you live. So you gotta find a basin nearby, right? They have European basin, right? European basin takes care of the entire continent there. Yeah. Or you have to go through, I heard some people tell me they're in Poland. So where would they go? Either they use the European basin or they go to London. They convert through London, right? They have a connection to London. So it doesn't matter where you are, right? It doesn't matter if there's no basin there. Or let's say even better. Let's say the basin's bad. Let's say the basin's corrupt. Yeah, it could be. There are places where basins are corrupt. Yeah, let's say. So if they're corrupt, you can't use them, right? Or it's going to be very difficult to use them, right? It's my way, the highway, let's say, right? And everybody knows that. So then you got to then you have to contact the basin somewhere, maybe not so close, okay, right? But just because there's no basin where a person lives does not mean they can't convert. And this is what I hear all the time. People will say, I live in a community, and the only place there is Chabad, and they say Chabad doesn't do conversions. Okay, you're right. Chabad doesn't do conversions. Yeah, that has nothing to do with you. The fact that they don't do conversions doesn't mean you can't convert. Doesn't mean you wouldn't be allowed to go to the synagogue. You don't need them to convert you. They don't do convert. I heard one case in the last 30 years. Somebody converted through a Chabad based it, right? It doesn't exist. Yeah, they don't do conversions in general. Okay. So now they could be telling that to, maybe blow you off. Say, well, we don't do conversions. Okay. Now, if you live in that community, what do you need them for? You need them, whatever, as, being part of a synagogue, very good. You need them to sponsor you, to vouch for you that they say that you keep kosher, you keep Shabbos. So obviously, even if I give the classes, I can't do that because I don't live there, but okay. They don't need to do the conversion. Yeah, it doesn't matter. They don't need to teach you classes. That doesn't matter. You need someone to vouch for you in that community. Very good. So now, what if in that community there's no basin? Right? So you can't convert? No. So you go to a basin that's nearby, wherever it may be. Right? It can be closer, it can be further. It depends where a person is. Right? Obviously, if there's a basin in the community, that's better. 100%. That's better. If you're not using that basin, then if you go to another basin and say, hey, there's a basin in your community, why aren't you using it? Right? I had somebody like that send them across the country, basin where they were wasn't good. And rabbis there asked me, they said, if we ask rabbis in that community, would they tell us why they're not using the basin? I said, yes. So I think they went cross country once, second time they went, they converted. Yeah, so it doesn't matter where the basin is, right? It's obviously better if there's a basin where you live. If there's no basin where you live, you go to the next state over, or 2 states over, or 2 countries over. It depends, right? Depends where a person is, but that doesn't mean anything, right? The fact there's no basin there, okay, complicates things a little bit. So then you're going to find a basin. You're going to find an air basin where people go, right? It could be, it could be in Europe. It could be, I don't know, next country over, 2 countries over. I don't know. Or a person may have to go to England. I don't know, right? In the States, there are plenty of places that do not have basins. Plenty of states that do not have basins. So what do? You go somewhere where they do have a basin. Doesn't mean you have to live there, right? Most important thing is you need a sponsoring rabbi, right? And he'll direct you where to go. Even if they don't have a basin in their state, right? So I would tell you, someone lives, let's say, let's say in the Pacific Northwest. Yeah, there's no basin in the Pacific Northwest, right? There's one in Seattle. Seattle's not really worth that much, but whatever. Someone's in that area. Where do you go? There's a basin in Denver. Denver's closer to California, right? That's where the basin is. Yeah, if you live in Phoenix, where do you go? California. If you're in Texas, there are a couple of basins in Texas, right? It's one in Dallas. There's one in, there's one in Houston. Now again, it depends where you live. I had someone who was in Oklahoma. They were looking for a job, trying to move to the Jewish community. They converted to Chicago. They went to Chicago. Yeah, they were ready to convert. Yeah, basically wanted them to move. They were trying to move, find a job. Okay, right? But they had sponsored a rabbi there. They took my class for the most part, and they ended up going to Chicago. Yeah, but there was no basin where they were. So just because there's no basin doesn't mean a person can't convert. You got to find a basin to convert. Yeah, keeping Shabbat, you have to know what to do. You have to be a rabbi, the person's connected to, or if you're connected to me or whatever, right? But again, put on tefillin is not an option. That should not be done until after conversion. So you have to learn how to put them on before conversion. Very good. You shouldn't be wearing them. Nobody should be wearing tefillin before conversion. Yeah. The command is to wash beside one's feet, touch down the floor, right? Talking about washing hands, right? Maintain a bedside table. Yeah, in case you spill it. Okay. Yeah, again, simply a person by the end of their bed, they could put a basin and a cup, right? We call it Negelwasser cup in Yiddish, right? A cup to wash, right? Etc. So that wouldn't be a problem. Someone here says 427. Okay. Yeah. So it's 427 I have to do. I have to do a lot of frequent relations, so I can't answer that. That's beyond my pay grade. I just heard someone actually speak about this. Someone came to the rabbi and asked him about, what was the number? The number was like 247 or no, 212. It was like frequent relationship with like, I don't know, 200 something, like 212, 227. I forget exactly what the number was. So the rabbi said, I have no idea. You have to speak to like a real, Kabbalist. So we sent him to Rav Yaakov Hill. It's a big one of the, it's Sephardic, but one of the top Kabbalists in the world today. I don't think there's any question. And like usually he tells the story. It's very funny. He tells the stories. I never, hear what happens. This is like a Litvish story because Hasidic stories you normally hear what happens at the end. He says, these type of stories never hear what happens at the end. He just heard like this thing or whatever, and that's it. So actually he said, I know what happened at the end of this story. What was the end of the story? He went to Rav Yaakov Hill. It's one of the big Sephardic Kabbalists. in Jerusalem. And he said, so he met this person, I don't know, a while later. He said, "Oh, what happened?" He said, "Did you go see him?" And he said, "Yeah." And he said, "And?" He said, "I can't tell you." He said, "Whatever." He flushed it out. Like, I can't tell you. Right? Now, what's the point? He was talking about the fact that, when it comes to, Kabbalah, let's say in general, not for most people. And most people learn it, there are different levels. Many, many different levels. So he said for him, he went to a lot of classes by Moshe Shapiro, blessed memory. Moshe Shapiro was definitely one of the biggest people in the last generation in Hashkafa and Jewish philosophy, but very much steeped, in Kabbalah. I heard him speak a few times, and he learned Kabbalah from Rav Hutner. Rav Hutner Zatzal of blessed memory, and he gave different classes. you know, some class he gave, like, you call it, I mean, he wouldn't call it this himself, right? The person called it like Kabbalah light, right? It wasn't so strong Kabbalah, but another class he gave more, and some like, in the middle of the night, he went to a certain place and learned with like big rabbinic scholars in Kabbalah, right? Okay, there are different levels. So you want to know 427? You have to speak to a real Kabbalist. Yeah, and see, that's not for me. I was thought it had to be under running water from a cup. No, no. We're talking about washing in the morning. If you wash in the morning, really, the cup should be by your bed. It doesn't have to be under running water, right? The cup really should be by your bed, and you should wash by your bed. Again, they have these things now where they have these big, Negavasa cups, these big plastic cups, and they actually have like a top on it so it won't spill, right? Even if it got knocked, it won't spill over because it's like got a proper cover, right? But let's say a person didn't do that, right? There's another opinion, a more lenient opinion, where your whole house basically you could wash anywhere. So yeah, you wash your hand. If you didn't do that, you didn't do it by your what do you call it? By your bed, which is probably better to do. Yeah, what does the person do? They'll go to the sink. They have a sink in the hallway, if they have a sink in the kitchen, not in the bathroom. Yeah, they have a sink, they have a sink in the kitchen or the hallway. Right? So you could do it that way. You 100% could do. I mean, it's a lenient opinion. You could do it. You could do it that way. But what's the best way when you wake up in the morning? Do it by your bed. Right? That is certainly the best way. Um, your question is okay. Back to this topic. If there's water left on the table after 20 people wash their fingers and someone touches the water, does they have to wash again? Um, I wouldn't think so. I definitely wouldn't think so. If there be water left on the table, 1 second. If there's water left on the table and it's left over, let's say it's spilled over. Yeah, it really should be spilled out. It's probably better. You don't make a blessing on it, obviously. You're not going to make a blessing on it. It's probably better. Yeah, if you talk, let's say, leftover water, probably, leftover water that already touched your hand. It already touched your hand and spilled over. Yeah, probably better to wash again. Probably better to wash again. Obligation? I don't know. I don't know if you have an obligation to. It's probably better to, but I don't think you have to, but it's probably better to. I was taught that it has to be under running water from a cup. I already said that. Again, there are two different things here. One is washing when you wake up in the morning, right? That doesn't have to be underwater per se. You can have a cup by your bed and wash from the cup. When you wash your hands for bread, you're gonna wash from running water. Same thing. Yeah, you're gonna put a cup underneath it and wash your hands for bread, right? The only difference, there are two things here. I wake up in the morning, right? According to many, you wash 3 times. You wash both hands 3 times. Any other time you wash your hand, coming out of the bathroom, washing for bread, you wash twice, right? And washing should not be done in the bathroom. It should be done in your living room. It should be done, in your kitchen, wherever a person has water, right? It should not be washed in the bathroom. Even if you wash in the bathroom, you cannot make a blessing on it, right? You don't make a blessing in the bathroom, obviously, but it's certainly better not to wash in the bathroom, right? I was shown to use a splash of water. It's gonna be more than a splash. You need enough water to cover your hand, right? It shouldn't be a little bit of water, right? It should be enough water to cover your hand. Yeah. So it shouldn't be a tiny amount of water. Definitely not, right? Because that doesn't cover your whole hand. It only covers part of it. Also, how do you check cashews on Shabbat? The same way you would check it during the week. No difference, right? You open it up and you see if there are any bugs. You see if there are any webs, any bugs, anything. There's no difference. The only question would be if you have, let's say, walnuts. The walnuts, you got a problem because you have the shell. The shell is muksa, right? After you crush it and you get, you get a. So you say, what about borer? What about selection? If I take out the walnuts, yeah. So you tell me I'm taking the good from the bad. Okay, I'm taking what I want from what I don't want. But here it's immediate usage, and that's the only way to get it, right? Either you can crush it with your hands. If you can't crush it with your hands, then you take a nutcracker. Now, if I take a nutcracker, what's the problem? Problem is once I crush it and I want to take out the walnuts. What's the problem? Problem is what I do with the shells now. The shells have no usage for me, right? The shells you can't give it to a dog, you can't give it to an animal. Um, um, you can't give it to anybody, right? So you're not going to eat it. Animal's not going to eat it. So if an animal's not going to eat it, you're not going to eat it. It has no purpose. So what do you do with it? So you put it on something that is permissible to move, i.e., put it in a cup, right? Or you put it on a napkin, you put it on a plate or something like that. But I can take what I want from what I don't want for immediate usage. That's not a problem with borer, right? So walnuts wouldn't be a problem. Any nut like that would be the same thing. But a cashew doesn't do that. Cashew just open up and check for bugs, right? It doesn't come in a casing like walnuts or anything else. Might be a bug inside. Okay. Um, Someone says you need to whip out your microscope. No, only what you see according to the naked eye. What you can't see doesn't matter. Yeah, there was a thing many years ago. I don't know if it's still an issue, but in New York they said there were like microscopic things in the water. You could see under a microscope. Yeah. Now some rabbinic authorities said it doesn't really matter because you can't see it. You can't see it to the naked eye. That's what we're talking about. Anytime looking for bugs for whatever on lettuce, let's say on on what do you call it, cashews or any of these things, it's only what the naked eye sees, not according to a microscope. Now, other rabbinic authorities said, well, if you can see it under a microscope, then you should boil the water first. Right? Some said you should actually boil the water first, in such a case. Others say you don't have to. It doesn't go according to, goes according to the naked eye. Someone told me that if you have, let's say, preserves, a person, let's say, goes to a, I don't know, supermarket, a store, or whatever, you buy, let's say, jam, different types of jam, obviously ones that are kosher, right? Strawberry jam, grape jam, whatever it is, and someone said if you put it under a microscope, it could be a lot of things in there. Yeah, even though they're totally pureed, you can't see it with the naked eye. Yeah, someone told me that, like, if you did that, you probably see a lot of things. You probably see a lot of things. Now, is that my problem? Not my problem. Why not? Because you can't see it according to the naked eye. You have to be able to see it according to the naked eye. Now, some may be stringent. In this case, even if there be things in it that are totally crushed up, but let's say you don't see them. Let's see the bugs or whatever, you don't see them. Right? They're invisible to the naked eye. Do I have to worry about it if it's invisible to the naked eye? No. I don't have to worry about it. Right? Why not? Because you can't see them. What if someone swears by it? Let's say you did a test. You did a test, right? You took some jam, whatever it is, put it on a slide, put it under the microscope, and guess what? See a lot of things there. Yeah, you see a lot of things there. Now, some people would say, okay, I'm not going to eat it. Yeah, fair enough. Right? Fair enough. But I would say that if you can't see it, it shouldn't be a problem. Right? Now that comes into a question. I'll just throw this out there. And it was like in South Africa, they have this fish called kingklip. Now, the kingklip fish the question if it has scales or not. right? Now, scales you can't see to the naked eye. If you scratch off, if you take a knife and scratch where these scales are, you can see them, right? But to the naked eye, you can't see them. So if it has scales and fins, yeah, so you could eat it, right? You could definitely eat the fish. Okay. In this case, the question is, are you allowed to eat this fish? Now, what's the problem? You can't see the scales. Yeah, but if you scrub, or let's say better, you scrape against, against the fish, the scales come out. Right? The scales come out. So that is different opinion among rabbinic authorities. Some rabbinic authorities say that scales are there, you can eat it. Even if you can't see them, you scrape at it, you can see them, you can eat it. Others say if you can't see with the naked eye, it's no good. Right? It's no good. So then that comes into play with a little bit different with the swordfish. Now, the conservative movement will say, which we don't really care, but we'll throw this out there. Conservative movement will say, well, it's an iffy fish. Well, we hold it's forbidden. Why do we hold it's forbidden? Because in the water, it has scales. Once you take it out of the water, it doesn't have scales anymore. Scales disappear. So if you don't have scales on it, then you can't eat it, right? So we don't eat it. We don't eat. We don't eat swordfish in general. Someone here says, Friday bought a box cashew, labeled kosher lemahadrin. Very good. Yeah, very kosher, let's say. And we just later noticed that checking required on the packaging. Right. They're telling you there's nothing in it that makes it not kosher. Right? You could eat them. Yeah, but what are they telling you though? What are they telling you? They're telling you that you still have to check them for bugs. Right? Person buys rice, right? Let's say outside of Israel, you don't really have to check rice. Rice is normally clean. Yeah, in Israel, you got to check, right? You got to check because just the way they are, they are kept or whatever. You have to check them, right? You have to check rice. So you could have the best rabbinic supervision, on anything. They're not telling you it's kosher. You can get the best rabbinic supervision, let's say, on figs. Yeah. So I would tell you it's not even worth it to check because the worm that can get inside a fig is the same color as the fruit of the fig itself. Yeah, so that's a problem. Right? I'm not saying you can't check. It's not impossible to check. It's going to be very hard to check. Right? But they're telling you the fig itself is kosher. They're not telling you there aren't any bugs in it, but they're telling you it's kosher. Yeah, so that's not uncommon. Even if they wouldn't say it on the box, it wouldn't bother me. Because you have to check them. Right? These type of things, when it comes to cashew nuts, cashews, walnuts, peanuts, other things, you gotta check them. Right? Even if they say they're 100% kosher, they don't need to put on the label. I mean, they shouldn't, or they probably do anyway. That people should be aware that there could be bugs. They're not telling you there are no bugs. They're telling you it's kosher. There's no other ingredient in there that doesn't make it kosher, right? But you still have to check it for bugs. Yeah. Let me see. Also, the person do if they struggle to find respect towards the base. Are there books that help with finding respect towards rabbis? So let's not make a mistake here. Right? Don't mix up Jews and Judaism. Rabbis can make mistakes. Yeah. Yeah, rabbis can learn Mussar for themselves. There can be things they do or they don't do that are good, that are bad. Okay. Yeah. How do you prepare for that? You come in contact with any Jew. They can be more observant. They can be less observant. They can be corrupt. There are Jews out there corrupt. Yeah. Orthodox Jews can be corrupt. They have an evil inclination like everyone else. So you're going to say, how do I prepare against Orthodox Jews that are corrupt? You can't. It's only a question of your attitude. Right? You say, well, if they're corrupt, how can they be Orthodox? Good. Good question. Right? If rabbis are corrupt, how can they be called rabbis? So you tell me, well, they passed their rabbinic exams. Okay. Now, does that mean they're 100% moral? They should be. They should be on the up and up. And what if they're not? Yeah, what if they're not? Could their rabbinic ordination, depending on what they've done, could it be revoked? Could be revoked. Sometimes it isn't, but let's say. Now, could a person have a bad experience? Yes. So how do you prepare for that? The only way to prepare for it, I would say, is to understand that people are human. Yeah, people are human. So if you understand people are human, you don't have to question. But it's supposed to be rabbinic figures, this and that. Okay. The greater the person, spiritually, the greater the evil inclination. Yeah. So they're human. Now, what if they do terrible things? They're human. Doesn't mean you have to like it. Right? Certainly doesn't mean you have to like it. And is it going to be hard to respect them in that case? Absolutely. Yeah, but it's only game and time. You have to deal with them. Unless you can go somewhere else. Unless you can convert somewhere else. Right? The only way to respect them, which is going to be a hard thing, you have to learn most of yourself. You have to try and find the good in the person. But you think some people are corrupt in this and that. Okay. Yeah. Yeah, they could be corrupt. 100%. There are rabbis out there corrupt. I'm going to say it live on YouTube. Yeah, there are rabbis that are corrupt. I know some of them. Disgusting people. Yeah, wouldn't trust a single word they would say about anything. Anything. Yeah, and I would deride them in public because they deserve it, and people should be warned against them. Etc. Yeah, people say, it's a problem though because people say, oh, rabbis argue this and that. Yeah, it depends what the argument is. It can be a very heated argument of learning, etc. But let's say someone is corrupt. Yeah. And this came up, a number of years ago. Someone called me out, and Rabbi Singer and Rabbi Skobach, and this and that. I gave this person an opportunity on Facebook. I gave him a golden opportunity just to state where all his ideas come from. Who is rabbinic authority, that's going to back them? Everyone knows who mine is, right? I don't hide it. Anyone, worth their weight in gold has somebody that they go to, somebody that they learned under. Yeah, or somebody they should be close to. Let's say. Now, if a person says, "I don't have to answer to you," and I have my own rabbinic authority, I gave a golden opportunity in front of millions of people. In front of the millions of people. This person just made fun of me and derided me and whatever. Okay. But I gave a golden opportunity. And this idiot, I don't have to listen to you. I don't have to answer to you. Very good. And I was stuck doing diet stuff. So everyone came out against him. They should have come out against him. It's a fraud. Yeah. Now people didn't understand. And this person's a rabbi. How could he say this and say that against much greater people than himself? I'm not saying, where I fall in the category here. Yeah. And people don't understand that. But why was the person called out? Because they were a fraud. And they were misleading people. So they had to come out against it. But people ask me, if this is a rabbi, how does he do that? How does he call people out like that? That's a problem. That is a problem. So I gave him an opportunity to come clean. Just say for everybody who your rabbinic authority is you go to. And that backs what you do. Just say to anybody, just tell the whole world. Tell the whole world. Yeah. Like I said, everyone knows what mine is. Very clear. Yeah, very clear. Right? It's a vouch for me, I hope. But it's pretty clear. Very, very clear. If someone doesn't come clean and say who their rabbinic authority is, that's a red flag. Major red flag. Yeah, but to do it. So people are saying, wow, your rabbi's arguing in a public forum. Yeah, that's kind of a problem. It's somewhat of a problem, but you know what? Sometimes you have to come out, you got to take a stand, and you got to come out against someone who's a fraud. That's what you have to do. You have to warn people. It's not Lashon Hara, right? 100% permissible. Yeah, as long as you know the facts and the facts are true. You have an obligation to warn people. 100%. That's your obligation. In that case, it's not Lashon Hara, and people have to be warned. People 100%, have to be warned. Yeah, so then you tell me, what do you do? In such a case, this person's corrupt. Okay. What do you do if you still need a document from them? So you gotta learn how to play the game. You gotta learn how to straddle the fence. Yeah. If you need them, you gotta figure out a way to do it the best way possible so you get what you need. Yeah. Even if they're corrupt. Even if they're corrupt. Yeah, that's not so easy, but in order to do it, you gotta play the game. Whatever the game is. And if you don't want to do that, then you gotta go somewhere else to convert. Listen, in other places, people know like what goes on in other places also. They know in certain places it's very hard to convert. They know it's my way or the highway. They know the person is problematic. They know that, right? Because that's the obvious question someone's going to ask. Why did you convert there? Why did you convert in this place? Like I sent someone across the country for exactly that reason, right? That basin wasn't worth spit. Wasn't worth anything. Yeah, in a lot of ways, many ways. So the other basins, okay. I mean, it's not like they didn't hear it before, but they want to know if we ask other rabbis in that community. And 100%, they'll tell you. They'll tell you straight away what they've done. That's why I'm not sending them there. That's it. Yeah. So if a person went somewhere else, but they know there's a basin where you live, but they know the basin's problematic, they're gonna cut you some slack. They understand. They're gonna understand the problem. Yeah. But if you have to use them, yeah, you got to figure out a way, even if they are corrupt, how to, maybe get on their good side to get what you need. All right, let me see other questions there. Does it help the world if Noahide studying Torah? Why not? Someone made the claim, I think it's false, but someone made the claim that, if there were more Noahides, then there'd be less anti-Semitism. And that's a false claim. The reason is because anti-Semitism is going to exist and continue to exist until the end of days, till the Messiah comes. Yeah. It's true. It's definitely true. If you had more Noahides, things would be easier, but you need a lot more. You need like millions, like to try and turn somewhat of the tide. But it's not going to end it. Anti-Semitism is not going to end till the Messiah comes, right? A non-Jew keeping their mitzvahs, yeah, brings morality back to the world. Yeah, it's a good thing for them to learn Torah, sir. Does it have an effect in the world? It certainly does. Imagine if more people were keeping the Noahide laws. Imagine. More people were moral people. That'd be huge. That'd be huge. You got the left seeming extremely noisy and causing chaos, all over the states and in other places, pushing how far morality goes. So imagine if the vast majority of people were keeping the Noahide laws. What a sanctification of God saying that would be. That'd be huge. So to say it doesn't do anything? Absolutely not. Yeah. Certainly has the power. Right? Certainly has the power. Yeah, it can influence others also, but even if not, but it can have power in and of itself. That's what I would say. All right, well, so let me see some other questions here. Are the one basin is good from Rabbi Respect a lot? Yeah, it's very thorough, but they take a long time. It take a long time. It takes 3 to 5 years. Yeah, so some people get burnt out by going there, but yeah, they're very thorough. Definitely very thorough. South Florida has a basin. Yeah, this person's in Europe. That's not going to help. They're based in North California. LA has one. LA has one, but they're also very thorough. Extremely. I've had a few people actually convert there in LA. Northern California, I have to check. Right, the main ones are in LA. There are a number of basins in LA. But yeah, the one in LA, the RCC, that's what it's called, Rabbinical Council of California, is extremely thorough. Probably one of the top rabbinical courts in the States. Certainly for conversion, and definitely recognized by the state of Israel also. It's removal of these hypothetical bugs, not borer. No. Why would it be? Why would it be? You're talking about on Shabbos. If I would take them out. So again, if a person sees a bug in it, you're not going to eat it. But if you would want to eat it, right? Let's say, I can take what I want from what I don't want and what I want. So I push aside the bug and part of, let's say, my cashew, my peanut, my walnut or whatever, I could eat the rest. That wouldn't be borer. But I'm taking what I want from what I don't want and what I want. If I just take the bug out and I eat it, yeah, that would be a problem. That would be a problem. If I take the bug out with something I could eat as well, yeah, then it would be all right. Then it would be all right. Someone asks, if you're not eating bread, you still wash your hands and then say probably blessing for food, or just wash your hands regular. You can wash your hands for cleanliness, but for hygiene, but you don't have to. If you know your hands are dirty, you can wash them, but you don't have to wash them one over the other. You don't have a ritual washing per se. But if a person wanted to do it for hygiene, they could. Right, but that's nothing to do with that's nothing to do with what do you call it? It has nothing to do with washing in general. Yeah, because you don't wash for anything else. The only thing you would wash for, by the way, you don't make a blessing for, and you wash like you would for bread, is if you ate a fruit that was wet. If you ate a fruit or a vegetable, let's say you wash them for cleanliness. Let's say, yeah, you wash them for cleanliness, they're still wet, right? So there would be an obligation to wash your hands. Some people are not stranger to this, but I don't understand why. But if you're eating, let's say, a peach, a plum, a carrot, tomato, whatever, you wash them off for cleanliness, yeah, for health reasons. Very good. If you didn't dry it off, then you have to wash your hands. You don't make a blessing on it. You have to wash your hands. If it's totally dry, I don't have to, right? Because it's something that's gone into a liquid. There's different types of liquids, right? For argument's sake, we'll just use water here. So if you had a piece of fruit that was wet, either you dry it off and you eat it, or you wash your hands and you eat it, but you don't make a blessing. Everybody holds, even if you wash your hands, you don't make a blessing on it. Can you shell nuts on Shabbos? That I answered. Yes, you can, and you can eat the shell. You can eat the nut inside. The shell should be put in a cup or on a plate or something, where you can throw that away because the plate or the cup or the napkin is permissible to move. So that you would be allowed. That you would be allowed to do, and I can take the nuts out of the shell because that's where you eat it, right? Same thing if you ate a orange, right? The peel is muktzah, right? No one's going to eat the peel. I don't think an animal necessarily is going to eat the peel either, but you're allowed to do that or a banana, you take off the peel, no one's going to eat it. So you're allowed to throw it away because that's the normal way you eat. Also, what if you do if you touch the dirty water by mistake, let's say left after, you should wash your hands. It's better to wash your hands if you touch that water afterwards. Yeah, you don't make a blessing on it. For sure you don't make a blessing on it, but you could wash your hands afterwards. You probably should. There's water left on the table, 20 people. Yeah, so if you touch the water, you should wash. You should definitely, it's better to wash. Yeah. Yeah, you don't make a blessing on it for sure, but you wash. Something yeah, because of bug checking, don't eat strawberries, very good. I wouldn't touch them either, even though I see a lot of places that sell them. But I don't know, I still got an issue with that. But some people say the way they used to check them, you can still check them the same way, right? Which again is something I definitely don't understand. And the reason I don't understand it is because others in the know say that the same way they used to check before, is good, right? But others that are expert in bug checking say it doesn't help. Say it doesn't help. So, I don't bother. Right? It's just not worth it. Not worth it to eat. If a person, let's say they got crushed up strawberries, yeah, they ate sorbet that had from strawberries, let's say you could eat it. Right? Because even if there was a bug in there, it's crushed up anyway. Right? It'd probably be crushed up anyway. You say it's gross, whatever, but you could eat it. 100% you could eat it. Right? Or my Rebbe would say you could take strawberries and crush them up yourself. I said, but according to the laws of kashrus, you're not allowed to. We say ein mavatal isur atchila. You're not allowed to nullify an isur, something that is forbidden. You're not allowed to do that, right? But that's the assumption. You're going on the assumption that there is a bug in there, right? So if you know there's definitely a full bug in there, then that might be problematic. But as my Rebbe would say, tongue in cheek. So what's the big deal? So it's high in protein. So you're eating something higher in protein, yeah. But he's going under the assumption that who says there's a full bug in there? If it's not a full bug in there and you crush it up, it's not a problem. right? If you knew 100% there's a full bug and you want to crush it up, that's a problem. That's for sure a problem. Yeah, that's definitely a problem. Um, yeah, I haven't eaten strawberries in a long time because there's a lot of things I don't eat because of it. Because of I remember my wife took this bug checking class once, and many, many years ago. Yeah, changed the way, no question. No question. One second. It's okay to have one challah and one pita on Shabbos. Yes, as long as it's whole. As long as it's whole, you can have one challah, one pita, or two rolls. Right? You could do. That's not a problem. Not a problem either. Um. One second. Someone asked. I can find the good in people since I can't see the bad. Okay. Yeah, but that's better. It's better not to see the bad, but you know, you can't be a fool either, right? At the same time, you can't be a fool. So, someone who closes their eyes to the bad and that could damage them, then that's a problem. That's for sure. That's for sure a problem. Um, yeah, let me see any other questions. Um, Broccoli cauliflower. Yeah, if it's frozen, there are certain companies that if it's frozen, it's better because they clean it in a special way. But again, similar to strawberries, that checking them is a problem. Checking them if they're raw. Yeah, raw cauliflower, broccoli. Even though person want to put it in salad, this and that, it's going to be Mutual of Omaha's Wild Kingdom. They are totally infested, 100% infested. So therefore, I wouldn't even tell people to bother with that. Yeah. Any other questions? Uh, all right, I'm gonna stop here. This every Sunday, 9 o'clock Eastern time, 4 o'clock Israel time. Anyone has any questions? Find me on Facebook at Michael Kaufman, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism, OrthodoxConversion.com, Beyond Orthodox Conversion Judaism on YouTube. There I got videos, Q&As, ethics of our fathers. Book of Leviticus, you want to send me an email, RabbiChaimKaufman at gmail.com, RBBI, CHIMCOFFMAN at gmail.com, which are good.